Yes.
Next week is also the office visit to all the conferences.
Okay, and what time do you need to leave?
I think they set up at 12. Right? Yeah.
So are you guys gonna leave a little early? Can't remember what we had talked about.
Yeah, I think a bit less. Yeah, it's not that tomorrow, so you usually leave at less.
Okay. So hopefully a lot of you are going to that, because that will be, I think that'll be a good one. I cannot find a pen and all of that. Okay, assignment 2.2. Let's review and just talk about, there are a few things that I noticed throughout what I was able to look at before the class this morning that I'd like to address. And part of assignment 3 is going to be redoing assignment 2.2. For those that may not have been clear, in assignment 2.2, and I'm hoping that you'll use the time at the end of the class today if you didn't do it, I was asking for a document. In addition to the maps, I asked for a document that listed all of the layers that you would anticipate needing for each of the maps. So if you didn't do that, please do that today by the end of the day, and I won't count it as late. But it was something that I was asking for. Even if you can't find the data, but you think it would be data that would be useful, and if you want to amend what you sent me, you're welcome to do that. But even if it's data that you can't find, but you think it would be useful for consideration of that map, please list it. Just do a brainstorm of what process or what layers that you would need in order to accommodate those different goals for those maps. Okay, so you can do that by the end of the day, and you'll have a little bit of time at the end of the class today to work on that, if you didn't submit that. I think most people did, but there were a few that didn't, so I just wanted to give you the opportunity to submit that. Any questions about the layers?
So it's just a list.
It's just a Word document of a list for each map, what layers you've included, and if you think of other layers that you can't necessarily find the data for, but you think it would be critical, list those too. Okay. Any other questions? And those, for the modules, again, I can see if you've gone through them. There's about 3 or 4 people, I'll email you at the end of the class, that either haven't started or are at about 67% completion of learning plan number 2. Yeah.
So I completed it all, but then I wanted to go back and watch or like read all the steps in order to like do my map, and it said start over. So can you see that I've like finished it?
Yeah.
Pushed
You're at 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just making sure.
No, that's a good question because I don't know, but I can tell you that you were at 100%.
I went through all 3 and it still said 67%.
Okay.
So, and I went back and tried to figure out where I missed, and I couldn't find that.
Okay, I know that someone had an issue with that in the last module, so maybe I'll just, if you're at 67%, I think you are still at 67%, I'll just check in with you and we'll do a, in good faith, check that you did do it and it's not registering. Yeah, okay. Okay. But there are a few that are at 0%, so if you need me to resend the email, I realize it's still going to junk email. Hopefully when you drag it into your primary folder, it stops doing that, but for some people it's still doing that. I even have trouble sending emails from my my Andrew Pogon account to NC State, as Madeline knows. And I'm also working with some other folks at NC State, and they like think I'm a total slacker because I haven't been responding to their emails, but they're all in the junk folder. So please regularly check that. NC State's pretty sensitive on their emails.
It doesn't seem anything to update my progress. Like I can't help with updating my progress. It doesn't give like a percentage date or anything.
Okay.
I don't know if that's for everyone.
Yeah, for lesson plan 1, because we're gonna keep going back to that one, that's okay. And if I'm gonna give you a poor grade because of what I see, I'll email you. It's not a perfect system, but I mean, we could do screenshots of the final exam, but they don't all have exams, so. Okay, that's for the modules. And then for the next assignment, there will be lesson plan number 3 that you'll need to, preserve a lot of time in your schedule to work on. Okay, let's talk about the actual assignment itself. There are a couple things that I noticed throughout most of you all. One of them was scale. So I want you to, we'll talk about this in a second, but you don't have to stay at the same scale for every map that you make. So before you even think about, how your map should look, think about first what scale it should be to serve the purpose. So for instance, the first map, which is a context map of a 10-mile buffer, obviously you want to show the extent of the 10-mile buffer. Okay, and one easy way to do that, and I'll walk through these maps, is to zoom to the extent of the buffer. So one thing that you can do is when you turn on your layer, you can right click. I might have to close this. And you can zoom to that layer. And then in your map layout, you can do it that way, or you can create a bookmark that we talked about last class. If you go back, zoom to, right click, zoom to layer. Zoom to layer, bookmark, new bookmark. Then you can just label it 10-mile buffer. Go back to your map layout. Go to bookmark it. I don't know why it moved on me. That's funny. And then you can just go to 10-mile buffer, and then that's your scale. Yep.
For a buffer, is there any way to create like a perfect circle, or does your element have to be a perfect circle?
Yes, it's literally doing an offset of the shape that you're buffering.
So if you're just doing like the center of it and you just pick an item, it's not like the buffer can vary based on what image or thing you chose to buffer from.
Yes, there's ways, if you want different shapes for whatever reason, there's ways around it. But this is literally a 10-mile offset of the property boundary of RDU forest, assuming that your input was RDU forest parcel boundary. And then it ends up being a circle because of just the geometry of offsetting that shape 10 miles. But there are other ways around that. If you want to offset from the center, for instance, instead of the actual boundary. But we can do that later. But yes, it is all possible. Okay, any other questions about scale?
I think it has to do with the scale, but the scale bar, how do you get your numbers so that they're nice numbers, not like 4.7, stuff like that? You know what I mean?
The graphic scale?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a couple ways around it. I'm going to zoom in so you can.
I tried to change just, because zooming it out, that I could not get numbers.
Yeah, I mean, you can play. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. Why is this? Oh, it's still. One second. Hold on, it's doing that. You can actually drag and pull where, select, there it is, okay. You can actually, let me zoom back. You can actually pull and push it to, until you get something that you like. You can also right click it and go to properties. And you can sort of adjust the divisions here. You kind of just have to play around with it to get it to something. But usually if you just drag it, it'll usually default to whole numbers.
Is it okay to have like those weird decimals?
It's better to have whole numbers. And it's also better to have something that is to an inch. What's that?
I tried playing around. I think there was an option that was like make real number or something like that, and it didn't do anything. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. I mean, the best thing to do is, once you have, let me zoom back to the extents of the map. Let me turn some. Let me just so you can see data. Once you have your extents, if you want to zoom a little farther out or a little closer in and make these whole numbers, that might help too. And then, if you zoom, it's kind of cool, it zooms. If you want to zoom and just see, double check, about an inch, should be something, hopefully. Have a division at an inch, and you can probably play around with that. But what I do is I usually just push and pull this until it's something that I like. But yeah, you typically want whole numbers or 0.5s or 0.25s, because if someone did have a scale, at this scale is going to be a little difficult, but if they did have, a ruler or a piece of paper and they wanted to sort of see, that would be super helpful. Okay, so that was for the context map, but for the other two maps, I think it would have been completely appropriate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to redline all the files that you gave me and give you feedback, and then ask you to address all the comments and then resubmit next week. So hopefully you'll learn by going through the redline process. But for the other two maps, it would be completely acceptable to zoom now into the extent of RDU forest or maybe a little farther out to look at those connectivity issues or land use issues or whatever it might be specific at the RDU scale. So again, you could just zoom to the extent of your RDU study area. Let me turn it on. And then if you wanted to zoom a little farther out, you could manually or enter in something like, 1,200 feet here, whatever you might want to do to focus in on the RDU forest. Does that make sense? Again, you could create a bookmark, and now you have a nice bookmark, easily go back and forth to the extent of RDU forest or the extent of the 10-mile buffer, or you can just right click and zoom to layer. Okay, another common thing that was a trick. So a couple of you got it. Actually, maybe only a few of you, maybe only Madeline, I don't know. So if you noticed, when you loaded the open space data for Wake County and you look in your 10-mile buffer, there's a huge gap right here. That happens all the time. You're always spanning different municipalities, different counties, different whatever. So part of the assignment of what I wanted you all to do is think about, well, why is that? Understand, maybe look at a base map and figure out that that's Durham County and search for Durham County data. So just so you guys know, luckily Durham County's come a long way. And that is in part of the assignment 3. Well, I don't know, I'm sorry, lecture 3 data. If not, it's in your overall data folder. It doesn't have much data right now. Oh yeah, there it is. It's right there. NC Durham. But luckily now Durham has also an OpenGIS data website. It looks very similar to Wake County and the city of Raleigh. And so they don't have as great of data, but they do have proposed and existing trails and parks. So one thing that you would do is just add that to your data layer. I'm actually going to just show you really quickly. I know you guys know how to add data now. Oh, sorry, I forgot where, there it is. Go to, so it's going to be Parks and Recreation in the NC Durham. And I didn't bother putting Durham again because it's Durham County and Durham City. So city parks, add that. And of course it comes in at some default symbology. This thing's really annoying. I don't know how to get rid of it. So if you want to create your own symbology favorites, so if you want all your parks, always you found a color that you really like, one thing that you can do is, okay, so I've added the city data parks. Then you can go over to Symbology and go to Properties and pick a color that works really well for you. And the other thing that I noticed at these really large, like, well, it's actually small scale, but you know, maps that show a lot of area, you may want to adjust or not even have outline color. So color is the fill color, outline color is the stroke color. Sometimes if your stroke's too big, or they call it outline, but in Illustrator and design another graphic, they call it a stroke. If it's too thick, you know, usually above 1 or really dark, it really just dominates the visually. So in some of these maps, you may just want to have no color at all, or do something that's maybe 0.5 point or 0.25 point, so that it's just reads a little more clearly. Okay, so back to what I was doing. So I'm going to say that that's the color I want for parks. So you can see here it changed the Durham color parks. And if you toggle this button right here, the line bars up at the top, you can save symbology or save symbol to style, and you can call it, you know, parks. I already have one, so I'm going to call it parks 2. And then you can create a category if you want. So you could do parks and oops, and rec, whatever you want to do. So now if you go back to another data layer, I'm going to go to this other city parks and go to Symbology, and then you go to Gallery, you'll see that it'll load it as one of your favorites here. So you can just, boom, all your parks. Every time you load one in, you have the color already preloaded, and then they'll all look the same, as opposed to going through manually every time and trying to remember which color you did. So I just wanted to show you that shortcut. I'm going to change it back to my preferred. That one. Okay, hit save. Did anybody have problems with GIS crashing at all? Or was it pretty stable? Okay, good. Okay, scale, missing data, fills and strokes. I think those were the big, other than other missing data. Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could quickly just step by step do that buffering. I was having a lot
Sure.
of trouble with that.
Sure, no problem, no problem. Before I do that, other things to consider is when to rely on a base map versus relying on actual data. So with regards to how, you know, the question about how people get there, how do they arrive, how do they use the space? Probably it would have been best practice to, and these were already loaded in your data folder. It would have been best, there's a parking, so all the parking in Wake County or in the city of Raleigh, or Wake County, I can't remember. It's called parking areas. I believe it, Wake County. Was in that, so that might have been a good thing. To show, and then also major roads was a layer. There's also a streets layer in Wake County. I think the streets layer actually has more information. With labels would have also been good. Now you can rely on some of those preloaded base maps sometimes, but sometimes they're not very legible or hard to read when you have shape files on top of them. So that may have been a good thing, data layer to have in those maps as well. Yes, Jody.
I have a question about labeling. So if you were to turn on like labeling for all of the parks, but you're wanting to just really have a few parks labeled, and the only way to get that is to select by attributes and go through and select those few that you want, or is there faster?
There's two ways. You could actually create a data layer of the only parks that you want labels of and create it as its own layer and then just label that layer. Or there in labeling, there are some formulas that you can put in, but you'd have to say label, name equals, and then put the name equals. So you'd have to do it for every park that you want labeled, which might be a little labor intensive if you wanted, maybe more than like 5. But I think the fastest way is to create your own layer of the parks that you want, and then just have it label it there. The other thing to do is you could just do it manually if it's only a few. Yep. Any other questions before we get to the buffer?
It's not directly. Now it's not
Oh, go ahead.
The square in the middle of the airport area really
Yeah.
bothered me, and I was trying to figure out how to make them one outline. And I couldn't figure out how to do that.
Yes, we will. There's a couple ways that you can do it. One is that we can just delete it. And we're going to go into editing and creating data in the next class. If you guys are ready, I think you'll be ready. Where you can manually just select it and delete it, or you can select it in the attribute table and hit delete. The important thing to know is when you do that, you deleted that record. So the best thing would be to create your own layer, which you already have, and then just manually delete it. There's also other geoprocessing tools that kind of, it's called like dissolve. But that actually is probably the quickest thing you actually do.
I wasn't sure what the correct way to do it. A lot of inputs.
Yeah, we'll get to dissolve and those actually in the next class as well. I'm trying to ease you all into the art toolbox. And one thing that I just want to point out, if you go to your Lecture 3 PDF, in addition to a class agenda to help you remember what we did, in addition to recording, I'm going to keep a running list of all of the ARC toolbox tools that I'm exposing you to, so that you can remember what they are. And then I'm also keeping a running list of terms that are really important. But I want you to know that this, the GIS dictionary on Esri, if you, dissolve or buffer or what's an attribute, I forgot. this is a great resource to get that terminology if I'm moving too fast or I'm saying things. I mean, feel free to ask too, but you can always refer back to this GIS dictionary, which I think is super useful because even I need to use it sometimes to know the difference between a few things. So I'm going to address the buffer question. So again, the buffer tool is a geoprocessing tool that can be found. There's again 2 ways that you can get there. But if you have in this window geoprocessing up, or you can go to analysis and go to tools. So again, should get my little pointer. There's always a couple ways to get to one place. So the tool button here, and then you have your geoprocessing window here. Now, these are the favorites that'll load of whatever you've been using recently, but this is all the tools. So it's going to take a while for me to show you all the relevant ones to landscape architecture. That's why we're going to do baby steps of the most useful ones. So that's why I'm just giving you the name of them for now. So luckily you have the search window and you can go to buffer. And buffer is an analysis tool. So I'm going to go back. You can see here, there's all the tools are organized by function. And then the buffer tool is in here. I think it's is it an overlay? Can't even remember. It's probably proximity. So you can see here, there's a buffer tool. There's also a multiple ring buffer, which I'll show you how to do here in a second, which is kind of neat. So you don't have to do multiple ones. So anyway, we're going to run the buffer tool. So you can either go to analysis, and then proximity, or you can just type in buffer, which is a lot easier. Okay, and then you get your window. All right, where do you think you were having trouble?
My input, my output. It just, I remember when I clicked around one time, the layer showed, okay, it was active on the left, but then the buffer was there, and there was nothing to do.
Just nothing? Okay. All right, well, we're going to talk about creating file geodatabases, which are just buckets that you put your data in that operate more efficiently so you don't run into errors like that. But in theory, it shouldn't happen, but you never know how there's a million reasons why it could have happened. So again, with all the geoprocessing tools, if you hover over input, output, what is side type, what is end type, if you hover over it, this eye pops up and gives you an explanation of a little more information of what it's looking for. So this is asking you for the input, point, line, or polygon features to be buffered. So for here, you can obviously just click down and it'll show everything that's in your contents bar. You can also navigate to the data that's not in your contents bar if you want to. It doesn't have to be loaded in your map to run the process on it. So for this, we want to buffer our RDU study area. And usually if it has a problem with your data, it will have a exclamation mark and a little triangle. And then your output feature, again, I always suggest renaming it and putting it exactly where you want to. We had created this map package, so hopefully you have a lecture, whatever the name of your map is, you have this geodatabase file that you're putting it in. It's just asking for so just hit open and then name, RDU buffer 10 mile. Let me do another one. I'm gonna call it 3. Every time I have an error with one, I'll just add a number to it. And so I know the one with the biggest number is the last one that I did. That's just me. Okay. And then now you need to give it a unit. So we went 10 miles. And then these are all optional. You don't need, you can just let those default. The other thing that I haven't shown you yet are environments. This is where you can actually specify what coordinate system that you want it to be in, which is maybe part of maybe what happened. There's something going on. So if you drop it down, you know, earlier in the last class, we sort of defaulted to the North Carolina State Plane coordinate system. So if you wanted to specify something different or just make sure that it was operating the same coordinate system that your map's in, you can either select current map, which I think it defaults to, it should default to, or if you want to make sure that it's the same coordinate system as a layer that you already have, you can specify that there. We'll get into environments a little bit more when we get into raster, where it becomes a little bit more important. But if you're having trouble, maybe select the coordinate system there before you hit run. So going back to parameters, hit run, hopefully it'll work. And you can see it working here below. And then it should automatically add it to your map. And then there it is. Sometimes little quirky things happen. I'm gonna hit save. Now the other thing that's really cool is you can do a multiple ring buffer. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. Again, you can type in multiple ring buffer, or you can go to the analysis tools. So I'm gonna buffer RDU study area. I'm going to navigate to my geodatabase that's called lecture 2.2, and I'm going to do RDU, buffer multiple. I'm just going to put multiple.
I have a question. If you don't navigate to a geodatabase and you just do it in the, will it automatically?
It will, but it's best to keep your data in those geodatabases. It seems archaic that you have to do that, but the geodatabase is a container that has an environment that all the data is centralized around, and so it's just more efficient, and you'll have less errors if you use a geodatabase. So the second part of class, we're going to start a new geodatabase for RDU Forest, because we're going to build on doing a suitability analysis of what are the best areas for conservation. So we're going to create a geodatabase that's called conservation, and then we're going to put all the data that we need to run that suitability analysis in that bucket. So yeah, it's better to keep it in there. And luckily, when you start a new map project, when you start from blank, it creates one for you. It didn't used to do that, which is nice. Yeah, and it's just data you're creating for now that I'm talking about.
Not data that you're downloading.
No, not yet. Not yet. We'll do that. You will want to do it, start moving forward, but for what you've been doing, it's perfectly acceptable to not have it in the geodatabase. But the data you're creating data when you do these buffers or you create a study area. You do want those together. Okay, so multiple ring buffer. This is a little different. We're going to do miles. I think okay, so I'm going to do 1 mile. Okay, and then hit enter. This is a little different than it used to be. And then you can do 5 miles and 10 miles. Oops. What happened? Yeah. Miles, field name. So what this is doing in the field name is that in your attribute table, when you create this multiple ring buffer, it's going to create a column that says 1 mile, 5 mile, 10 mile. So we'll look at it here in a second. And then here's where you can either dissolve the rings. So if you have, so it's going to do a 1 mile, 5 mile, and then a 10 mile. So one option is that it actually doesn't create separate data for each of these, and it just dissolves it into one, so you still have the line words. Or you can just not dissolve it and each one will be separate. There's different reasons why you would want to do one or the other, but typically, you'd want to do this. So non-overlapping rings, buffers will be rings around the input features that do not overlap. So like donuts. So typically that's what you want to sort of create. So I'm going to hit run. Might take a second. All right, so I'm going to turn this guy off. And then I'm going to turn, here's my 10 mile. And that's it. Yes. So now you have a multiple ring buffer. And if you open the attribute table, right click attribute table, you'll see here distance 1, 5, and 10. And now that it's loaded in your attribute table, you can actually label these rings 1, 5, and 10. One other thing I wanted to show you while I'm here is that you can see, well, this actually has shape area. But if you have created data, maybe let's go back to the study area. It already has it. Well, I thought I had. Well, these already have area, but if you want it to calculate the actual square footage or mileage, the area of the geometry that you have, you can say add field here. And then type in area. Hit enter. So it's added a field here. Oh wait, and then you have to hit save. This is sort of stepping into editing now, but this is just a quick thing. So you can hit save. Go back to your attribute table. It should be loaded here at the end of the attribute table. And if you right click, you can say calculate geometry. And then this will pop up. And then we just want to do area. Let's say we want this instead of acres, we want square feet. Coordinate system, current map, and hit run. And it'll calculate geometries for you. It'll do areas, it'll do lengths, it'll do a lot of different, oops, yep.
Just when you create it, there's also one important part that is defining what type of data. It was long when you could define that as text.
Oh, was it text?
No, it wasn't. It's just saying that as a part of it to look that when you create.
Okay, let me try that again.
But it was long.
It was? Okay.
That's just doing the square footage of the land itself. Is there ways to do like the square footage of parks within the circle or the building circle?
It's going to do whatever's in the attribute table. So if you wanted to isolate certain features, you could create your own layer of that and then add the field and get it there.
And then you have to do the buffer from that, you'll do the buffer and then.
Yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to get the area of. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go to add field, type in area 2, because I screwed that one up. And as Alini noted, the data type, this is just, are they words, are they numbers? So is it a text? Is it a date? I'm actually gonna say that this is a float, but you can do long, short. It's just the amount of characters that you get. You can look all this up. I don't remember all the specific, like I don't know why you would specify something as a blob. Which is good, now I need to look it up. But you can see how all these others have already been set. So their areas are double. So I'll just do double. And then I'll just say, it's just a numeric. That's probably why it wasn't happy with me. And then hit save. We'll see if that helped. Then if I go back to my attribute table, it should be at the end. Right click, calculate geometry. Area. Oh, wow, you can really do some fancy stuff here now. Area unit. Well, let's just do acres, see what that means. I'm gonna hit run. Okay, and then it inputs your area. Now it might be helpful when you're naming it, you put what unit you did so you remember, like AC, underscore AC for acres or underscore SF for square feet. Otherwise, you're not gonna know what unit the measurement's in and that won't be useful to you. Okay, that's a quick look at editing. We'll do a deeper dive later on. Yes?
I've got a quick question that, kind of like not associated with this really, but, you wrote a list of questions and I answered most of them while I was doing the math, except for how to connect directly to the data on Raleigh's, like data page. It wasn't working because I was trying to like directly link so that I don't have to download it. And if we could go over it.
Yeah, and I'll note that some of the larger data sets like parcel data or elevation data, it's so big, it might not load.
Okay.
It might just be too slow of an internet connection. And so that might be part of your problem, but I'll just show you one more time. Yeah, that's why it's not perfect. I think of that as more of like a quick look at data. But yeah, I'll just show you really quickly. I was going to go to Durham, go to parks. This APIs, you really just controls.
Okay.
It's the first one. I don't know the difference. I should probably look that up. First one, Control C. Add data from path. And then Control V. And then add. I don't think it's a perfect, I think it's better to download if you can. But if you're just using it just to look at it really quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think it's perfect right now. Eventually, I think everything will be like that. Will be online. You won't have to download data, but we're just not there but I'm preparing you for the future, not the past. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Topography, yeah, I don't know if it was intentional, but like where the airport is, the contour line is just like a long point. There's missing topography block.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, and I thought maybe it has something to do with, it's like right over our site, essentially, so it's kind of like, oh, that's not very helpful, but.
Oh, I guess I didn't realize that. Yeah, I want to go through that topography data because I want to show you how to clip data and make it smaller so you don't have to run huge data sets. So if we can just hold on that. Okay. And does anybody, for some reason, I have no writing utensil except for that pencil that was with the sign-up sheets. Can I have it back?
So I get everything done. Oh, here it is.
Madeline, what?
I had a question about the layouts.
Okay.
Three different layouts for the three different apps. But I'm wondering if there's a way to like preserve the layers and legend for like a specific layout. So, like,
That is a really good question.
I set up the first one and then made a new layout and then turned on and out some different layers and it changed it on the first layout. Is there a way to?
I think there is a way to create a new feature, but I think there are styles that you can create. And I'm going to look that up and I'll report back to you. But in the meantime, a quick fix is you can literally copy and paste. Well, maybe not the map, but if you had, remember you could have, you could add a guide, to where your map, layout is. I don't know if you can copy and paste these, but you can, probably not. But there is a way to create styles that preserve this, but the other way is just to literally Control C. Just insert.
I don't know the same issue that you're on, like, that was a problem, but what showed up in the map, yeah, itself.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Like, setting up showed on it, and then it was the same thing for each layout.
If I wanted to have like one layout where I was just put ecology stuff and put it back to another layout where it just had like parking and trails or something.
Did you play around with this drawing order here and preserved it?
Yeah.
Alini, do you know, it's called Data-Driven Pages, and it's it's different in this version, so I'm gonna have to look it up, but there is a way to do it, but it used to be called Data-Driven Pages. Alini, do you know?
No, I'm trying to think here. I'm thinking that maybe when you turn on and off the layer, it's changing your legend or maybe changing multiple layouts at the same time.
Yes.
So I'm not sure how to now change them if you're changing the layers.
There is a way to do it. I'm gonna have to look it up because that should be the whole point of creating multiple layout.
Something that I didn't know what it was, and it's called list maps series. So like, I think it's series. I didn't quite understand what it was, I thought maybe.
The series, yeah, I think that's usually for when you have like a huge area and you want a map grid of the whole area, and it creates it for you. But there is a way to do it. I just don't know how to do it in ArcGIS Pro, but I will learn for you guys.
Wouldn't technically, if you made the bookmarks, the view work, wouldn't if you like navigated, if you made one of the bookmarks your first one, and then your second layout you were working on another, like, you know what I mean? Instead of actually trying to edit with this as maybe further.
I don't think the bookmarks save what layers are on and off. It's just the graphic. It's just the spatial extents. So there's definitely a way to do it, and maybe there is. See that span map extents. There is a way to do it. I'm just gonna have to look it up because it's different. Before, back in the day, you would actually create a new file for every map you're gonna make. So, which is not fun. But now what I do is I just export everything to Illustrator and do everything there once I get all my geoprocessing done. But baby steps. Yes.
I have a question about Illustrator, actually.
Yeah.
So I was getting frustrated with the text tools.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just pushed it over to Illustrator. But when I did it as a PDF, it was really blurry, but when I did it as a GPS, it was fine. It was just as a grouped layer.
The PDF was blurry?
The PDF was blurry, and it was just weird.
Did you change the DPI? Like, there is, like, I think the automatic version is like 72.
Oh, the resolution.
Yeah, so
The resolution.
if you go to share and then export layout, there's a resolution here.
I think by default it's 72, so maybe if you increase that would get better, I guess.
Yeah, because in theory, the PDF, if you don't have any raster images in here, but were you using a base map?
I exported my layout as just a PDF file.
But did you have one of those preloaded Esri? See, that might have screwed it up a little bit.
But when I exported that as an EPS file, it was, I have it now, it's really clear.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just don't know what you do.
Yeah, what I would do is I would actually export the two separately. I would export your data, which is vector data, separately than your raster data, and then put them in Illustrator together. But yeah, and if you only have vector data like I do right now, this is all lines, polygons, polylines. The PDF in theory should be vector, so the resolution really shouldn't matter because it's vectors is.
Maybe just a base map.
I think the base map's screwing it up. Yep.
Also, did you have any transparency in any of the layers? Sometimes that's screwed up when you're trying to import to Illustrator.
Yes. Yeah. Transparencies. If you're going to do transparency, just wait and do it in Illustrator. Don't do it in GIS.
Is there a way to like select individual like vector line work in Illustrator from? I know that's like advanced for now.
Yep.
That's possible.
Yep. You have to, sometimes it groups the data or it'll be a clipping mask and you have to release the clipping mask. If you know how to do that. We will talk about Illustrator later on. But I'm glad that you're experimenting because it's just, to me, you can make better looking maps. Yep.
When it comes to labeling or Illustrator and Design GIS, are they interchangeable or?
Between Illustrator and InDesign?
Yeah.
You can, the thing about InDesign is that you can do a lot of things that you can do in Illustrator, but not all of them. So I would, as far as labeling goes, yeah, I would actually, my process is labeling in InDesign.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't want to complicate things, but yes, I create the maps in Illustrator and then I bring them in InDesign and then I do all my labeling and layout there. So Illustrator is just basically serving as a layout tab in GIS for me. And now there is a new add-on to Illustrator that connects to Esri Online. It's not perfect yet, but we'll talk about that at the end of the semester as well, assuming I can get it loaded on machines, which might not be possible. So, but there is an extension that's supposed to link to your Esri account so that it'll load your map from online, so you don't have to have a hard copy on it.
I was just wondering if there were any design firms that have been using GIS GIS successfully that have their work online? Like,
Probably, I mean, well, Andrew Pogon, but I already showed you my work. Alta
okay.
might be a good group. Anyone that does large scale planning, maybe Brian Starkey, which is now Timmons Group. I'm not sure. Stewart, in theory, they have the capability. I don't know if they actually use it, but
Just wondering, like, places where it's been worked successfully.
those are local places, but Sasaki,
Yeah.
Design Workshop, any of the really big firms that do a lot of planning, large scale planning work, they have great stuff online.
Okay.
And then if you go to Harvard's GSD website and look up GIS, they have some good examples there
Okay,
too.
I just want to see like what is possible. I'm like, I've got a limited scope.
Yeah.
What is possible, so I just like wonder.
Yeah, all of those are great resources.
So may I try to load the road shape file, the roads and the parking to some of the area we're thinking? I don't know if you
I noticed that.
Yeah, I was not-
Which the parking areas?
yeah, and between the
Yes,
airport and
yes, I did notice that. I think what I did, it's cut off. Yes. Okay. So I think the other thing that I looked into doing, and I don't know why it's like that. If you ever, I also want to point out, let me move this guy again. You see this thing down here? This is telling you if your data is loaded or not, but you can also refresh if something like that's happening, which is not the problem here, but that would be your first step just to make sure that it's loading. I think one of the data layers that I have are impervious surfaces, and I think I put it in the land cover. So Wake Raleigh, I think I gave it to you guys. There's a stormwater impervious surface area. Are these just points? No, that's not what I did. No. I don't know why it's cut off. But let me try something real quick. Parking areas. Maybe it was just something on how I downloaded it. So maybe we need to re-download it. Let me just, I'm gonna copy and paste this. Oh, come on. Maybe it might have been just a bad download, which can happen. See here, it has the pause button right now. That means it's loading data. And now it's done. Yep, there's just something wrong with the data. Interesting. So maybe when we do editing, we'll create our own layers nearby where we know there's parking and add to this, but I don't know what happened. I don't know why it's cut off like that. Let me put the aerial on. So I'm going to add a base map imagery. Yeah, it looks like there's my computer is not happy right now. There it is. I'm gonna make this white or no? Oh, we'll just stick with the hot pink. So we might want to clean up some of this data. So we'll do an exercise in class that does that. And maybe we'll give it to Raleigh. That's strange. I don't even know. Is that parking? Oh yeah, so, oh, yeah. So what we can do is we can manually edit some of that data. So thank you for pointing that out. Data driven. Are there any other questions about assignment 2 before we move on? Yes.
I wasn't able to get like my symbols to show up as well.
They're too small.
They're too small. I didn't know that was just because of like the size of the layout. Like if, like when you printed the layout, I didn't realize it would be much bigger.
Yeah, I mean, you can, you know, if you right click and go to properties, you can adjust some of the size of at least the text if you want. It wasn't working?
Yeah, just the text will be bigger, but
The labels?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, there may not be an answer to that, but it should default to something that's, okay, so remember, I don't know if you all were able to see this part because when I re-recorded it. But if you go to the layout and go 1-to-1, whoops. That's about how it's going to look on paper, which is not great. But the other thing that you can do, which isn't ideal, I don't know.
I see someone can just adjust the rectangle, it can be bigger.
It can be bigger, yeah.
But in my computer, it doesn't work. I don't know.
Yeah, let me,
It's very strange.
let's see if there's just a scale.
You have to do the text. Like text symbol appearance.
Oh, it got a little bigger. Yeah, it's still not very big. Well, it's not perfect. I'll have to play around with that.
Like my font, it was like 16, so I could read it.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just going to change this. I don't know why it's not
Yeah.
adjusting.
It's okay, I think I was being too picky.
Well, the other thing that you can do, yeah, that's weird. I'll have to look into that too. It's a little different because,
Maybe we should do.
well, here's the size. Oh, that's just, it doesn't matter. Just makes it the box bigger. I'll have to look into that. Maybe you guys, yep.
Like, do you have a standard page size that you like to
Well, as you all probably found out with the size of these PDFs, we can do 24 by 36 or 11 by 17. Those are going to be the two sizes we'll commonly use. Layout or landscape orientation. But it depends on your data. I'm going to have to look into that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do, which is not ideal, is if you right click and say convert to graphics, you can do it that way, but I don't think it's still connected to your data anymore. It's just, it's not going to well, hold on, let me see. If I add this, see now if I add data, it's not going to load. Because now this is disconnected to your data. It's just a graphic. But that's one way. That's one way that you can do it. It's not ideal, but yep. You're welcome. I don't know why it's like that. I'll add that to the list. Legend size. Any other questions? Any other frustrations, troubles? Okay, I'm gonna turn this aerial off because it's gonna. Okay. Let's zoom Durham County. Okay, I did want to do just a refresh of a couple other things, just so you guys did that. Remember, we can create symbology based on attributes. So if we wanted to show the parks as different types of parks in different colors. Remember in our attribute table, we have type of park, which means now we can symbolize the parks based on any of these columns. So we go to our symbology window. Right now we have a single symbology, everything's colored the same. But we would like to do unique values. And we want our field to be type. And then we can go in and manually adjust these colors or use an existing color ramp. These are called color ramps or color schemes. You can actually make your own ones if you want to get fancy, or just go to Illustrator. So I'm going to zoom to layer and just, these aren't great. Another general comment for coloring, you know, try to use things that make sense. Vegetation, parks, stuff like that, green, waterways, things like that, blue. For instance, roads, black or gray. Try to stick to something that when someone looks at the map, they associate, unless you're deliberately have a really good reason why your trees are blue, or, I mean, as in any design representation. If you have a good reason, it's fine. But for people to easily sort of look at your map and digest the information, try to use colors that people associate, you know, with water or vegetation as much as you can. Here, doesn't really matter, but so just remember that that's all, you know, another way that you can symbolize things. I don't think many of you did that, which is fine. You didn't have to, but just something to consider.
Question, Jim.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do this process, but with the roads and like usership on the roads, and like making them thicker or varying the color based on how many people drive per day. And the closest thing I got was speed limit. Is there any way, I also tried to find metadata to like understand what those different things meant. And it was like pretty hard
Yeah, one way that I usually do it is they'll, like if it's a city road versus an interstate versus a highway, I'll change the symbology based on that. But if you can find traffic counts somewhere and they're in a table, and maybe this will be another exercise that I'm going to show you anyway, is that if you have, for instance, the name or the state road number on this table, and then you have another table that has the counts of traffic, but it also has either the name or something you can associate with this table, it's called a table join, and you can join the tables and then you have that information. That's an exercise we're going to do later. But that's a common thing that you do in GIS. So if you can find the data and it's not spatial, but then you do have spatial data that has a similar column, you can join them.
Okay.
But for now, usually transportation road data has city road, state road, federal road, and at least you can do it by that. Sometimes when you download the data, they already create layers for you from different, like the DOT, if you go to NCDOT, they'll already have them categorized for you. We'll talk about data layers, data sources when Jeff's here next week, assuming he still shows up or some natural disaster doesn't occur. Okay, so I wanted to point that out. So that was a very good question. The other thing that I wanted to go through our querying data, which is a little different now. But just as a reminder, remember when we were trying to find the RDU parcel? So we had all this parcel data. And obviously all of you did that pretty successfully. So there are a couple different ways that we could actually select and isolate that layer and then make it its own layer. So one of those ways is to manually select it. So all of your query tools, query, which is, looking for stuff, are up here. So you can select by pointing, you can select, or in clicking, you can select by a rectangle, you can select by whatever method you want. So here, the parcel selected, we want that. But we didn't know that RDU only had that one parcel. So if you did know that, that would be one way to do it. And then you can go into your attribute table, it highlights the feature that you have selected. And then you can either go right click, data, export feature. And this is where you're going to want to export it to your geodatabase. And any geodatabase you've already used in your map should be sort of already hyperlinked or quickly favorite linked into this database folder. Select that. Name it. I'm just going to do 2. So that's one way to do it. And then it'll add it to. And so I want to clear that and show you a different way. You can also select by attributes. So when you select by attributes, your geoprocessing window pops up. We're looking in the parcel data. We want to create a new selection, and we want to add a clause where the owner is, what is it, RDU International? Is that what it was? Raleigh, Durham, yeah. And it starts to auto-populate. I know, I was having trouble with it too.
I used to search mine for the FID.
Oh, the FID. Oops.
The number, it wasn't all over there.
It's very, I mean, you can't spell it wrong. And it's slow. You can do this little check to make sure it's a valid expression, but you might as well just hit run. I'm just going to go ahead and hit run. Yes.
Explain again what the difference between a cross-coding, a selection,
Yes. Yes, so when you right click and you have something selected, you can either data export feature or selection, create, where is it? Make layer from selected features. This is more of a temporary data. So it's just loading it in your map for that time being. And it might not necessarily be there, or it might, it's a temporary data.
why would it not necessarily be later on? Like, why would
Because this is just a temporary way. I don't understand. I don't know why GIS has it that way. Sometimes it will always be there, but I was always taught that this is a temporary way of creating the data. Whereas when you're exporting it, you're actually creating a permanent feature, and you want to export that to your geodatabase, and that's just a more stable one. I don't know enough about programming to know the nuance, but just know that if you want a permanent data, that's it. Now I use the temporary one because I have a lot of steps in the processes that I do in GIS, so I don't want the intermediate steps. So that is actually very fine with me to have that temporary, and then GIS will clean it out, and do a dump at some point when my hard drive's full.
you, I guess, yeah, so if you made like a temporary layer, you just select that layer later and then.
Yes, yes, and then it's permanent, yep. Actually, that used to be the only way that you could do it. Now they've added this export to the right-click menu. So, not that you guys care about how it used to be done, but where was I? Did it do it? Yes. So it selected it here based on this. So that's another way to do it. Then there's this other way. So I don't know if you recall, because I was stumbling a little bit last time, and that there used to be a Control F find in the attribute table, but for some reason they got rid of that. And if you go on ArcGIS online, there's like all these old people complaining about why Control F isn't on there anymore. But I think they think that this was their way that they were going to resolve it is with this locate tool. So I don't know if you all remember, but we use the locate tool, but it's actually linked to Google Maps. So you can actually just find any, like, Anita Bojangles on Western Boulevard, or, you can find anything. But you can also find data in your attribute tables. So you can do a layer search. So if you click this little filter funnel, and you go to layer search, and you type in RDU, or no, sorry, Raleigh, Durham. I might not get this right the right time. And then you go to your settings and make sure that I think I've already done this. You can add the layer that you want to search. This seems like such a long way to go about it. But you add the layer that you want to search, which I want to search parcels, and I enable it. I go back and I hit return. In theory, it'll find anything that has Raleigh-Durham International in the parcel data. It's a lot of records, so it's going to take a long time. And if it does finish searching, it will pop up. So I just wanted to show you there's a lot of different ways. You can select manually, you can select by attributes, you can select by location. It didn't do it. Or you can use this locate tool, which seems to not be It might be case sensitive,
Yeah.
which is really annoying. Did I spell it Raleigh right? No. Wait, no, I did. There it is. Yay. Okay, it is case sensitive, which is very annoying. But now you can click on that. You can add to your selection by right-clicking. Oh, wait, no, that was, oh, it searched all these layers. Okay. Add to selection. Oh, wait, let me clear. Oh, RDU study area. No, I want the parcel. There it is. So I want the parcel, because that's the attribute table I have, add to selection, and then it's selected there, and then you can create a new feature by right-clicking, export the feature class. Okay, I think right now we can take a break. Was there any other refreshing things that you wanted me to do from what we already have gone through? No? Okay, take a break, meet back in 5 minutes, and we'll go into geodatabases. Hey, how are you? Good, how are you?
I brought some forms that,
Oh, yeah, let me do that.
so it's here and then here.
Okay.
I got the wrong special app when I was on my tab and I couldn't re-enroll in the course because it says that I was I have to go like get it.
That stinks.
Yeah, I emailed them like immediately when it happened, and they're like, "Sorry, please fill out all these points."
What was the first day of class?
31st? No, 31st was the first year that is. Yeah, maybe, but
Was that?
August?
August.
Huh.
Was it? Was class started?
Yeah, it was the 31st, because I was at the beach. I'm just going to spin all applicable.
What do you?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, you need to email me earlier, like, I don't know where they are.
It's okay.
I have a,
I finished the exam, but I'm not sure. Professor couldn't see it because I'm not sure.
You're in it?
Yeah.
That's okay, we can just double check.
Before the class, the assignment.
I think that's it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very
Good
much.
luck.
Yeah, I have to write a memo about like a justification for joining the class.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And the university.
Yeah.
That's okay, we can just,
And the pen 2 and 3 also opened in my own account.
the university.
Yeah. So I figure.
I can look real quick.
Troubles about that.
So you use your personal account instead of the university account to do the assignments
Okay.
online.
Okay.
And she thinks that you might not see it because she's not on the organization.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'm not in the.
All right, so geodatabases. Geodatabases are, again, these buckets that we want to store all our data. And when you're running multiple processes like buffers or some of these other features in geoprocessing, you kind of want all that data to be in one place so that it can easily ask, if it needs to ask or talk to the data, it's in a bucket, the same bucket where it talks to the data. So it's not going all across the landscape of your computer to another hard drive or whatever. It's in this bucket. That's the best way as I can explain it. Is that geodatabases are good. I'm going to show this. Okay, so I would like you all to, hopefully everybody is in ArcGIS Pro. I'd like you all to go to Catalog and go to Databases. Actually, before you do that, let's go ahead and go to and start a blank. So if you go to Project, go to Blank, and we're going to call this. Let's go ahead and call it Assignment 3. Well, no, let's just call it Lecture 3 _03. Navigate to your class folder that you have on your external hard drive and go to lectures and create, I already created one, but create a Lecture 3 folder and hit OK. So you're gonna put everything sort of stored in this Lecture 3 folder. Hit OK. I want to save the changes in my old map. Yes. Yeah.
So you know, like when all the maps are open, like when you made all your maps and your layouts and it's all on that ribbon, I should say.
Yes.
If you save one, does all that go into one file, or do you have to save it individually?
It will save everything.
Because like when I go through the little quick save at the top lights up for each individual one.
Oh, it does?
I didn't know if it was those are different like tabs or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you are. I was under the impression that it once you hit save, right now it's not going to have that as an option because I'm just in catalog, that it saves everything that's in your, because it's a project package, so it's saving everything in there. Mm-hmm.
Just like layout one was assigned catalog. If I went to it, then that save would light up again. So I just didn't know if it was.
No, it should save it. But if you close out of it and it's not saved, it'll ask you, just as a precaution too, in case I'm wrong. But I've never saved them individually. So you should be good. And I should also know you can have multiple ArcPro windows up at once. So like you can have multiple packages up at once. So if I wanted to open another one, I'd just go here and I could open 2.2 lecture and then, you know, have another package open if you need to do that, just so you know that you don't have to have just one package open at once. Okay, so in your blank, you should have, you should be in catalog, which again is just Windows Explorer for GIS, just where you see everything. And then you have these favorite locations. I just want you all to double check if you go to folders. Just make sure it says lecture 3 there. But you can also add your data folder, so it's sort of a quick link. So if you just right click there and say add folder connection and navigate to your class folder, you can say data, and I want my data folder to always be quickly accessible, and hit OK. Some of you hopefully already had that, but if not, hopefully it'll default to that now every time you open. Does everybody have that? Okay. Now if we navigate to databases, you'll see here that because we just created that lecture 3 folder, it's creating a lecture 3 geodatabase. But now what I want to do is that we're going to get you started. It's going to take a few classes to get there, in doing a suitability analysis for the places of the RDU parcel that are best suited for conservation. All right, so we're going to create a conservation geodatabase. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to hold all of our data. It's also going to hold our tools that we use, our favorite tools that we're using, projections, the coordinate system that we're using. It's going to hold all that environmental, GIS environmental data. So if we were going to do conservation, meaning what are the areas that are best suited for protection from a natural system perspective, what types of layers do you guys think we should probably be looking at for those conservation plans? Not only is what should be, what should contribute, but what base data will we might need for conservation. So if we were going to protect the natural systems of the RDU forest, what natural systems data might we need to identify what areas we would protect versus maybe areas that we might develop? So watersheds? Or just the general hydrology? Soils? Land cover type? Vegetation? Yeah, so vegetation would be one land cover type. Topography? Yep, habitat. So one data of habitat might be endangered species habitat. What else? How about steep slopes? And steep slopes would be a derivative of would come from topography. We might also want to know about wetland soils or flood-prone soils. They're not exactly interchangeable, but for the sake of this. Speaking of flood-prone, we'll want streams. So this is a larger category. These are smaller categories that are throughout streams, water bodies, floodplain. Very important given our hurricane proneness. What else is a good start? Something that's also when you get into the Sustainable Sites Initiative and what it means to build sustainably in landscape architecture, there's also something that you want to protect, which we call agricultural soil. So prime farmland is also an important thing that might be, even though the use might not be for forests, you might have a forest like, but it's a important preservation land that, especially in North Carolina, because this is being good quality farming soil is being destroyed at an alarming rate. So it takes thousands of years to get soil back. So that might be something that you want to protect as well. You could also say wetlands could be a part of habitat that you might want to protect. And then land cover, you might want to take this a step farther and go into different mature forests. You might want to dissect your, chop up that vegetation data into mature forest, or again, it could be wetland vegetation we might want to value more than other types of vegetation, or maybe even riparian, which are the plants that grow along the streams or within a stream buffer. Might be important for protection. You might also want to protect, I don't know, there's a million other things that we could do. Steep slopes. This is a pretty good list. You might think of anything more.
Maybe one parcel to know who owns it around it.
Oh, maybe there's sort of adjacent. Let's put that under, maybe we're trying to protect corridors. And maybe that has to do with adjacent properties or something like that. That are also in conservation or similar. Anything else? I think it's a good start. What's that?
Recreation.
Recreation, yeah. So I'm gonna put that in, I might just create a new one and do land use, existing land use, existing, and maybe even proposed. Somebody already has a plan for it to be open space, so that's where open space, parks, and recreation. So, I think it's important to know, so these are all, the types, the big sort of chunks, categories of the data that we're looking for. And then within those, we can begin to isolate these other aspects of these big chunks of data. So, once we get all of these and we identify, and this is further into the semester, but I want to get you set up for it. We are going to basically do an overlay analysis, so you'll have a layer. This is you'll have a layer of all of your hydrology. And then you'll have a layer of the best soils. And then you'll have a layer of mature vegetation. And then we're going to add all of these together, and where we have the most overlapping of all of these resources are going to be our high quality spaces or priority. Does that make sense? Okay. So to make sure we're on the same page. So in order to do that, there's a lot that you're going to have to learn to do that, but the first step in that is creating a geodatabase. So that's going to be our bucket for conservation. So in the geodatabase, we want to right click and we're going to say new file geodatabase. And we're going to call it conservation. Just call it conservation, keep it simple. So you
What's
just,
the difference between a geodatabase and a file?
so that's a good question. If you right click, you'll notice that there's file geodatabase. So it creates a file geodatabase on a local or network computer. And then the new add database. Oh wait, the difference between these two?
Okay, I guess that clears that one.
That's a connection. Yeah, there used to be a thing called a personal file geodatabase that you might see in the older GIS software, but those are very unstable and bad. So just do file geodatabase. Does everybody have a conservation geodatabase? Yes? Okay. So, all right, just hit save because just be in the habit of control S-ing every now and again. So now let's go to insert a new map. All right. Let's add some data. So let's go to add data. And you can quickly go to your folder, data. Hopefully you have that. Go to Wake County and add, let's see, what do we want to add here? Let's add, let's go back and add some your parks. Let's go to Wake County. Oh, no, let's go to open space, sorry.
Are you went to folder, data, and
Wake County, Raleigh. You should be in your, do you have a data folder on your external hard drive? Do you have the North Carolina, Wake, Raleigh? We're gonna add that open space. Do you guys have open space in your data folder? Okay. Okay, so what we want to, wait for Jody to get in. Okay, so what we want to do is that we want to add all the data that we need for our suitability analysis. Again, this is we're gonna eventually get to suitability. So we want to add all the data that we need into that conservation geodatabase. So there's a couple ways that we're going to do it. I'm going to show you a long way and then a quick way. So if you go to analysis and go to tools, or again, you can just go to geoprocessing on the right-hand corner. And go feature class to feature, just type in feature class. If I can spell. To geodatabase. So you see this feature class to geodatabase? Actually, I'm just going to show you the quick way because we don't have a lot of time left. So you're going to input the features that you want to add. So right now we're just going to do open space. You can see here you can add multiple layers. So we could even navigate, if you hit the browse folder, back to your data folder, go to Wake Raleigh. We're not going to get to topography today, sorry guys. Go to hydro, go to surface, and let's add some hydro lines. And then hit OK. Oh, where'd it go? Doesn't like that for some reason. Okay, doesn't like that one. Let's try hydro areas, hydrology areas. That one? Huh, okay, never mind. Not sure why that's not working right now. Let's just add open space. Okay, so we're gonna put the output geodatabase. So if you click on databases and go to conservation, and just, you don't have to double click it, you just have to select it, hit OK, and hit run. It's gonna put that open space in your geodatabase, yes.
Copy of that?
It makes a copy, yep. Yes.
I think you have to add that layer to the
Yeah, in theory you shouldn't have to, but that's probably why it's not working, because it's not loaded in the map. Probably because it's not in a geodatabase. So we would add all the layers that we need, and then we can add them not just one at a time, but we can add them all together at once. And then we can begin to use that data. So I wanted to quickly show you that because it's best practices and I hadn't done that yet. But if we go back to catalog and just right click conservation geodatabase and go to properties, should have done this probably earlier. Oh wait, no, never mind. Never mind, forget what I said. Okay, so the one thing that we forgot to do that I wanted to make sure that we make sure that you do every time you create a new database, or sorry, map, is make sure that the projections in the coordinate system is the way that you want it. So if you right click the map and go to properties and go to coordinate system, right now it's saying it is North Carolina state plane feet, but if it's not, you want to add it. Hopefully, who doesn't have it as North Carolina state plane feet? Okay, it should hopefully default. Okay, it's just a good thing to check every now and again. Okay, so before I take off, I want to talk to you about assignment 3, which is, it should be loaded in Google Drive, but yeah, it should be all loaded in Google Drive for you, but you can see it up here on the screen. So again, please start with lesson plan 3, the modules. And unlike in the past with these modules, the last module, you actually are going to create a map. It's asking you to print the map physically, but it's fine if you want to just do a PDF print. So you don't have to pay for printing. So I'm just going to show you, maybe it might already have it up. So learning plan 3. So the first two are these are all kind of refreshers with adding a little bit more information. So please complete them in order. But this one, this is where you're gonna have to export a map. So the first two are web courses with, I believe they have quizzes at the end. And this one's a little it gets fancy, let's say, fancy maps. It's kind of strange because it's talking about bombing locations in Vietnam. But what's astounding is how many bombs the United States dropped in Vietnam and Laos. So it's sort of informative too for you. But basically what this is going to do is take you through step by step how to create sort of this map that they have, and it'll show you some new tools about inserting tables, which might have been useful in your context map. When you had all those parks listed, it might have been useful to have a table, a list of what those parks actually were, and maybe some information on them. So the finished map, hopefully you all put your own personal design attention to it. But basically, you're going to learn how to, add different text, add these sort of different density maps and charts. So very similar to what you've already done, but just taking it one step further with data that's already preloaded, so you don't have to mess around with the actual creation of the data itself and just focus on the map layout. So you're free to just print this as a PDF, not physically. If you want to physically print it instead, that's fine. Go ahead and bring it in class, but you don't have to. And then the second part of the assignment is that I'm going to give you feedback by Monday morning. I'm going to really try hard to do it by 9 o'clock on Monday morning of what you turned in this week. And I'm going to ask that you address, I'm not going to be too crazy with the edits that you make, that I'll probably give you red lines of what you should have done. And then what I want you to do, I'll separate them and what I want you to do for, resubmitting it. But remember, if you didn't submit to me a layer list of ideal layers for each of those maps, you have till the end of the day today to get that to me. And I'm sorry if it wasn't clear in the assignment handout. So that's it. So those 3 modules, they're actually pretty quick, but I will say that third one, creating that map, does take a while. So the sooner you can get started on that, the better. Do those first, and then focus on resubmitting the 3 maps. And I'll promise to get you feedback by Monday. Sorry, morning I can't really do it any sooner than that. Yes?
Our assignment PDF, maybe I'm not sure great. It just looks different than what you have up there.
There's an assignments folder. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to have to take off, but Alini's going to stick around and help answer any specific questions you have. And then for those that did not do the complete assignment with the layer list, I encourage you to do that